Okay, so let's look chemically further at what these simple versus complex carbohydrates are. Okay, so simple sugars, or sometimes called simple carbohydrates, are also called monosaccharides. Mono because they have one, what we consider sugar unit. Here's an example of 3 simple sugars. They all have the same chemical formula, C6H12O6. And as it turns out, there's over 32 isomers of simple monosaccharides that have the exact same molecular formula. And isomers, they're structural and geometric isomers. And so, for example, all 3 of these common glucose, glucose, and fructose. This is alpha glucose, this is beta glucose, and this is beta fructose. They all have the same molecular formula, but take a close look and see if you can see structurally what's different. In this case, on the number 1 carbon, this hydroxyl group is below the ring, and in this situation, this hydroxyl group is above the ring. And so that gives what we call a stereoisomer, which we did not go into in this class, but it's just the order of the groups around the carbon are different in this case. If you go around from right to left, it looks like, well, if you look at the molecule from the side, it would go OH, and then this line, and then hydrogen, and then this OH. If you go around the carbon that way. And this one, it goes hydrogen, then this side of the molecule, then hydroxide, then that side of the molecule. So just that little difference right there makes a difference in some of the chemical properties of those 2 isomers. And then fructose, the ring in fructose has 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons, but it's a 5-membered ring, whereas these are 6-membered rings. The oxygen is in one of the points of the ring. And in this case, the big difference is the 5th carbon, the 6th carbon actually excuse me. In this case, you have a carbon and a COH group above the ring, and this one a CH and an OH below the ring, where in this case you only have one of those on each of these. Okay, here we've got an extra carbon hanging off the ring. So that's the difference, and just those little structural differences make a big difference. For example, fructose, the simple sugar fructose, is about 6 times sweeter tasting than alpha glucose. Okay, so just that little structural change. All right. Another type of simple sugar is the disaccharide. The disaccharide has 2 monomer units, sugar or saccharide units, and that word sugar, saccharide, and carbohydrate are used interchangeably, you'll see. But anyway, in this case, the disaccharides, such as sucrose is common table sugar. Okay, it's been refined from either sugar beets or sugar cane, and you'll see what happens is the OH from this bound to one of the carbons and the H bound to an OH that's bound to another carbon are split off, and a new CO bond is formed between this carbon and this oxygen to give this COC linkage that links, and it's the characteristic link between the different monosaccharides to form disaccharides. And then water splits off. So this is another example of a condensation reaction that happens in nature when simple sugars are brought together to form sugar linkages. And you can imagine this reaction is in reverse, is part of metabolism, where sugars are broken down, and that when a sugar is broken down, water is added to the disaccharide to break it into the individual sugar units. Okay, so that's an example of a disaccharide, which is also a simple sugar. And then there's other simple sugars that are disaccharides that are common. There's 3 common disaccharides that you may have heard of. Sucrose I just showed you, and it's a combination of the monomer called fructose and glucose, and that's common table sugar. Another common disaccharide is lactose. Lactose is also called milk sugar, and it's made of 2 monomer units, galactose and glucose, and galactose looks a lot like glucose. It's a six-membered ring. It's just the OHs are arranged slightly differently, like above or below the plane of the ring versus the glucose. And you may have heard of lactose because you've heard these words before, lactose intolerant. And lactose is milk sugar. So here it is, a carbohydrate that's found in milk. And what happens is some people, actually 80% of the world's population, lack the enzyme. Well, their bodies stop producing the enzyme after they grow out of childhood. And slowly over time, their body stops producing this enzyme. And the enzyme is called lactase. And the job of lactase is to break down galactose and glucose to help digest it. Okay, and so what happens is if your body does not produce lactase, then you can't break down the galactose and glucose, and so it can't be digested as easily. It can't cross over the tissue between the stomach and the intestines, and so it gets built up in your intestines, and bacteria eat it. That's why people who are lactose intolerant get really bad stomach aches, cramping, gas, diarrhea, whatnot, because the bacteria is having a feast on this sugar that was not digested by your body. So you'll hear people take lactate pills. Those are pills that have the enzyme lactase in them to help people digest sugar. Digest this particular sugar, which is called lactose. All right. Whoa, something's going on here. Whoa. Okay, sorry. Maltose is another common disaccharide. This is a little disaccharide made up of a glucose and a glucose, two glucose monomer units to make this disaccharide. It's also sometimes called malt sugar. It's found in barley seeds as the seeds are starting to break down the starch to provide energy to the plant. It has a sweet taste, but it's about half as sweet as glucose and about 1/6 as sweet as fructose. It is, you've heard of malt, like malt liquor maybe, or malt in beer and stuff. So it's a kind of a breakdown product of starch that the yeast that ferment the alcohol will eat this particular starch, the malt, which is the maltose, to make ethanol, you know. And so anyway, you've heard of malt liquor. That's what they're talking about, is there's still some malt sugar in it. And then it's not as sweet, but this maltose is used as a sweetener in Asian countries. And the most common way to consume it is to put a layer of it between two pieces of biscuit, like crackers. Okay, so although we may not be quite as familiar with it here in the western part of the world, in the eastern part of the world, this particular disaccharide is used as a sweetener. We use sucrose. Okay, maltose is used in other parts of the world as a sweetener. Okay.